Hi, and welcome to my final project on woodpeckers in the study area that I did. These are pictures I did take quickly to go over this. These are the pictures I did take. I don't have a color printer, so they are in black and white. But also, this is my graph and my chart that I will use. It was just easier to print them and have them here. And like I said, when I was doing my week 4, my Excel was broke or just not loading or something happened, so I had to find something like Excel and print it. So this is the best I could do. But to start with my introduction, I will bring this up when I talk more about my graphs and stuff. But to start and introduce you guys to this project, basically what mainly interested me in pursuing birds and specifically woodpeckers is because of how active they are on our land. I hear them every day and a majority of the time all day if I leave my window open. But what interested me in my location is I haven't, since I had my daughter, been able to truly explore our 10 acres of land. And I have always been curious too, because when I sit out there with my daughter, and she loves outdoors, so we're always out there, we have so many birds. So you can hear them everywhere. It was hard to choose a bird to study because if you just go out and stand in the middle of the woods where we live, there are so many birds flying over you. They're making music, and the woodpeckers were they're very loud. So that's mainly why I went with them, because it was distinct to make sure I can hear them and choose my area of study. Um, Also, when I first started out, when I wasn't really choosing a species yet, I did find so many um, worms in my plot, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could possibly do that, but there's only a few species, so it wouldn't make sense to do that. But I did realize, like I said, after studying them for a few days, I was like, oh, there's only two types of worms in Maine. It looks like there's two here, but they don't go far enough to me to truly get a study area of why they go there and stuff. There's just too many of the same ones. Um, let's see. So I did have two sources that I could go over right now. Basically, one was by Hardin, and it was basically the influence of woodpeckers as ecosystem engineers, and it was super neat. But basically, it taught me a lot about woodpeckers and how they choose a spot to forage or nest, which basically is all based on danger and protection of their nesting site, and also are there insects to forage and eat around them on the ground and in the trees, which mainly trees is where they get their food. And I tell you what, we have so many trees. Like I said, it's a wooded area, so I can see why they venture there. My source too was based on, it was actually a bird watching HQ, and it was all based on Maine birds, and it was a very credible source. But basically, it focused on woodpeckers and in Maine and where they live, why they live there. And I did notice, because I live in the deep woods of Maine, this is why I'm getting two different woodpeckers so close, because they do sometimes interact, but not as much in different areas. Like mine, because it's so wooded, gives them plenty of space to live apart, but also come together. To go to my hypothesis, if I seem out of breath, I apologize, and also if you hear my daughter, I apologize. I'm limited to what I can do when it comes to that. But my hypothesis is woodpeckers will visit the site with more insects and plants than the site with less insects and plants in a 1 hour period. It took me a while to come up with this hypothesis, and thanks to you for helping me. But it did take me time to come up with this, because I was out there and I was like, I can do something with sun. I guess I could do something with sound. But then I thought about what they eat, and I was like, where do they venture to more? They have to venture to places more where there's food source. So it just made sense to me, but I just couldn't get a grasp on it for a few weeks of like, how do I want to go with this? How do I word this? So I am thankful for your help there. My prediction was that the left side of my plot would have more insects and plants because of sun exposure, but also dampness too. And I did predict that, and as I was going, I did realize that I was correct. I did see differences on each side and did see birds venture to both, so it was interesting, to see that as well. But woodpeckers did mainly stay on the left side in that 1 hour period that I studied them. I only saw them fly away in the opposite direction of the right side plot, which was neat. because it was kind of like, is there just not much protection over there because it's not as heavily wooded, so it kind of exposes them. So I was curious. Let's see. So, like I said, my study area was very deeply wooded on both plots. One was a little less like wooded. It was wooded. It's just not as many as my left plot. Um, so, and also one was more damp than the other. My feedback from week one was really about focusing on how big my plot would be and what I would be studying, and I didn't really and truthfully get a grasp on my study, like I was saying, until like week two, and that is where I decided birds over trees, because I was going back and forth between studying birds or insects around the trees or trees in general, and I did have to redo my hypothesis and my plot area. I ended up, when I redid my plot area of how I was going to measure the birds, I was going to do a transect line, excuse me. I only did this because it just made more sense to be able to study birds after I did some research on it. Let's see. So, like for week two, I did, like I said, I studied worms and birds, and I noticed that birds were the best choice because of variety, and whereas the worms weren't. The worms I saw, like I said, there were only two different kinds, so it really did not make sense to do that. And then here's a question and what you asked us to answer. Why was this a good area in which to test the hypothesis you presented above? For me, it was a good area for me to test my hypothesis because of the clear differences between the two plots. The right was drier, that led to the lack of plants and insects, and the right was damper, which had more trees, insects, and plants, which led to the woodpeckers to nest and stay in that area more, because nesting and making sure they're safe is huge when they come to picking a place. Why are these organisms a good subject for your testing hypothesis? Woodpeckers are amazing creatures, but a lot of people don't know why they make their noises, where they live, and that was including myself. So because they were so active in where I live, it was easier, I should say, to come up with a hypothesis to test, and just it made sense to create a study project around it. Methods, like I said, I use the transect line, which is a line straight through both plots. You stand on the line and record everything I see or hear. It just made sense. The results, the woodpeckers went to the left plot that had more insects, which means beetles, worms, and grasshoppers, what they eat, and they eat little bugs too, but those are all kinds of different names from what I saw. And plants, including trees, which is where they get their insects as well, and nest. The next question, if your hypothesis was supported by your data, does this mean that your hypothesis is definitely true? No, not at all. So weather definitely plays a huge role. So different weather could have made them go elsewhere. They might not be where they were in those plots, but because of this weird rainy then warm weather, I feel like it definitely played a role. And then next, if your hypothesis was negated by your data, does this mean that your hypothesis is definitely wrong? Well, my data, like I said here, my chart, if I can show it here, try to, what my data say what my hypothesis did for the most part, especially with the 95% confidence interval, was basically the same with a 19.1 to a 20.9. So really not a huge difference in each one. What is the alternate hypothesis? All right, so the alternate hypothesis would just be that the woodpeckers don't go to either plot more than the other because of insects or plants in either area in a 1 hour period. When it comes to my data, while I recorded it all, this alternate hypothesis would be incorrect, but if it was better weather, I could see it being true. What are some ecological factors that may have influenced your results? I like this because there were a bunch. But some factors that definitely influence the results are weather and slope in the plots. Although it wasn't a drastic slope, there was one. So different organisms like worms, beetles, they live in different areas. And I definitely feel like those were like the slope, the amount of trees in one area. But at the same time, that's a good point. I'll get to that in a second. But trees don't always play a role. What are some logistical or other non-ecological factors that may have influenced your results? Like I just stated, I would say the amount of trees. After doing some research, I wondered if like woodpeckers go to certain areas or organisms go to areas that are more heavily wooded, and that is not true. The amount of trees, because a wooded area, no matter what woodpeckers are in wooded areas, so it didn't matter how many trees, honestly. It really didn't. What might you do differently if you were to repeat this study? I like this. Um, I would say I think I would try to study all birds in the area if possible. Obviously, it wouldn't be an easy task to do, but there were so many different birds that when I was out there watching the woodpeckers and their behavior to the woodpeckers, it was so different. So it would be neat to definitely compare birds, and I think it would make a bigger, better project, honestly. Next question, if you were to build on this work and continue to test, refine your hypothesis, what would be the next steps? The next steps would definitely, for this specific hypothesis, would be to get a bigger area. I had a big area, but because woodpeckers go back and forth, they travel here and there quickly, especially in the 1 to 2 hour period that I studied them when I was out there, I need a bigger area. I would use the same hypothesis, obviously, because I really liked mine. I really thought you could create a solid project using that. But yeah, overall, like I said, I got some really neat pictures of them. There's two on this one. Ooh, that sounds good. But there's two on this one that you can't really see. But then you have one eating on a feeder that I have, and this one's just blown up. But it's super, super, super neat. They were beautiful. But thank you.